Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode here on African Confessions. The following story that you're going to be listening to, it was sent to me by one of our admins, and the message reads like this. My mother-in-law, she is a monster. I got married at 25 and I was happy to finally start my family, as I didn't have a family of my own. I had no one and I didn't belong anyway. When school closed, I would go to my mother's relatives or my auntie from my father's side of the family. I was a visitor all the times, and it is painful to have clothes in the bags and never be able to unpack them because I didn't have a room of my own. After I finished matric, I then came to Johannesburg and I started staying with my mother's sister, who was married to a very arrogant, stubborn man, someone who never cared, and he only loved his family, and he would make me feel as if I was a stranger. I stayed with them in a place called Benoni for about 2 years, and those 2 years I felt that I didn't belong, and that is how I ended up meeting with this gentleman at Gautrain, and we then became friends, and before I knew it, I was swept away. He loved me and I loved him too. We became inseparable, and within 6 months, he told me that he wanted to pay lobola for me, something that I had been waiting and I could not get. All my cousins were getting married, and these cousins of mine that were getting married, they were much, much more younger than me, and that was discouraging in a way. I felt so much pressure, but the guys were not available. Yes, just to have some fun with. There were guys that wanted to have fun with me, but I wanted a man whom I could call my own. Finally, God had answered my prayers, and he went to my mother, and all her family members gathered to witness such a beautiful day. This day, it was really beautiful, and because my mom was looked down upon, as I came into the family, I noticed that my mom-in-law was too much involved into his son's life, and she would call him almost every day. All her calls were accompanied by a request of money, food, and I didn't have any problem with that. But as I got married, I started noticing a lot of things that were not pleasant at all. We then visited her, and this time my mom-in-law had a lot of expectations, but these were not communicated. That is when early in the morning she woke up and she started to cry and shout out on top of her voice. I had never seen such drama in my life. We quickly packed our bags and we were all shocked and left, but my husband was defensive of his mother's behavior. When we arrived, she called and told her son that he had to be very careful with me because she had a dream, and yes, in that dream, a snake was sleeping with him in his bed, and I happened to be that snake. Whenever she would call, all the happiness would be swept away, and I then started dreaming about her. Those dreams kept on coming to me. At this time, because I had married a breadwinner, money being sent to her had been reduced, and she blamed me for that. She started sending her son messages saying that I was the bad person and he must be careful of me. I would dream of her, and whenever I would dream of her, the following morning, my husband would turn into this monster and shout at me, Brother Nashi, and it would be bad. Such things were really bad in my marriage, such that I would have to pack my bags. It would turn into an angry lion, and I would have done nothing at all. One could see that indeed this whole thing that was happening, it was just spiritual. But when you are in that situation, you just choose to ignore that all of these things that are happening, they are spiritual. My emotions were now controlling me. Instead of praying, I just chose to ignore, and I then started fighting with him back. In most cases, I would dream being put in water, and if I dreamed that something bad would happen to me, all this time, I never thought that it was her. My relationship with my husband became very bad, and I had no hope for the marriage. She made it clear that she hated me, and when she called, she would talk to her son and never ask about our baby and me. I also respected her, and I would not force myself where I was not wanted. And the shock of my life came. Yes, when she came to visit us, I heard our son crying, and she was with the baby in the guest room. And at first I ignored, but the crying became too much. I rushed into the room and I was shocked, Brother Nashi. I was shocked to find her naked. She was naked and she only had white powder all over her body. My son was naked too, and I quickly snatched my child and I left the room without saying any word, and she continued to speak in a weird accent as she was communicating with her ancestors. My husband had gone to work at the time, and I decided to deal with this alone because he would always support his mom. That was very strange. What was she doing with my son naked? Why was the baby crying? I prayed as I was washing my son, and then she spent the entire day closed up in her room. And when the son came back, she was quick to come out and said that your wife does not want me. I want to go back home. When she said that she wanted to go back home, she wanted to go back to Limpopo. That is where my husband's relatives are at. I looked at her and kept quiet, and my husband looked at me with fire in his eyes. She became the victim, and I was all of a sudden the perpetrator now. My husband lost his mind and started to shout at me, and she even started crying. And she said that she had spent the entire day hungry. I had not fed her with anything. I just went to the kitchen and I then started cooking. But Brother Nashi, she refused to eat the food that I had prepared for her. That same night, we went to sleep, and as I was sleeping, something said, "Wake up." And when I woke up, I saw that my mother-in-law, there she was, standing right next to me in my bedroom. And me and my husband, we made sure that every time when we will go to bed, we locked the doors. She was just there. She was naked again, and I looked at her right into her eyes, and she made a big clicking sound, and she left. I felt powerless and I became very weak. I struggled to sleep for the next 2 hours, and as I slept at around 4 a.m., within 30 minutes, I felt my entire side going numb. When I opened my eyes again, Brother Nashi, I then saw my mother-in-law. She was standing right at the place where I had seen her standing earlier on when I felt that urge to pray, but I ignored that urge to pray because I was so stressed out. She was naked again, and she kept on making that big clicking sound as she said, "Mwah." And then Brother Nashi, she walked out of that room. And when she walked out of that room, I felt my entire side going numb. Then later, I felt like someone had poured hot water on my hand and legs. I screamed, and my husband woke up, and then my side was red. And within a short period of time, I had blistered. I had blisters on my entire left side. I was quickly rushed to the hospital, and the doctors confirmed that this was not herpes, and this was something that they had never seen before. They kept on asking if I had been burnt by water, and I kept on saying that no, I was discharged and went back home, and she could not look at me directly into my eyes. And that time, I expected my husband to be there with me by my side, but he would spend the entire evening with his mom, laughing and talking, whilst I struggled alone with the baby as I was busy nursing my burns. Hubby would come to sleep at around 12 midnight, and I would look at him and never say anything because I thought that I was being unreasonable. I had told my mom about this, and she was on her way the following day. I had not told my husband that I had seen mom-in-law standing next to me the morning before I had got bent. 2 days after my mom had arrived, I started to see that my mom-in-law was not happy, because my mom is a very prayerful woman, and she would wake up each and every morning at around 3 a.m. so as to pray. She would pray for all of us, and because my mom-in-law was not a very spiritual person, that is when she said that she wanted to rush back to Limpopo to check on her home and her grandchildren. That is how she left. My mom, she continued to pray, and that is when I noticed my husband. He started to be very warm towards me, and he came back to his senses. I got better, and my mom left, and we stayed for about 3 months. Then it was the festive season. Brother Nashi, we packed our bags. We then traveled all the way to Limpopo for the Christmas holidays. On our way, my heart kept on pumping, as I knew that the people that we were going to visit, they didn't like me at all. His sisters were waiting for me, and deep inside I knew that nothing good was gonna come out of this visit. As we arrived, my heart was pumping heavily, and I was filled with fear. I was the enemy here, and my mom-in-law had made it clear that I am the reason why her son was no longer providing for them. The welcome was cold, and she hugged her son, and she just looked at me and did not greet me. War had been declared. I went into our room and slept, but I didn't want to be here. I hated it here, but I had to be a submissive wife, hence I had traveled all the way from Gauteng. 2 days later, my sister-in-law had made dinner, and on this day, food was given to people, and I was given a plate of pap and beef stew. Brother Nashi, as soon as I was done eating, I started to sweat a lot. I felt really hot in my body. I felt like there was a fire that was burning in my tummy, and I started feeling dizzy, like really dizzy. The whole world was spinning around me, and I saw darkness. I asked my husband to quickly hold my hand and to take me to our room. I could not see clearly, and as I walked into our room, voices started to fade away and my vision became blurry. I managed to say charcoal and pointed in my handbag. My husband saw that the situation was critical. He put me on the bed, took a cup that was in the room, and poured water and then mixed with the charcoal. This was done in less than 5 seconds, but everything was closing down on me. He made me to drink the charcoal. With the little strength that I had, I drank it, and within a few seconds again, I started to vomit. I vomited, and he noticed that this food that I had eaten, it was just full of poison. This was food poisoning. He rushed me to the hospital, and I was rushed into the ICU. At this time, I was already unconscious. They drained all the poison, and the doctor thanked my husband for giving me charcoal. He said this was a dangerous situation, and it was fast. It was going to kill me within about 30 minutes. I had to stop breastfeeding because the poison was all over my body. Brother Nashi, 3 days later, I was discharged, and we left for Gauteng. My husband had seen that I was not wanted, and all this time he was blinded by his mother's love. He apologized, and up to now, I don't go to visit my in-laws. He goes alone, but he won't eat too, and he won't sleep there. I thank God for preserving my life. Dear listeners, right there was a message that was sent to me by one of our admins. So charcoal, please, is there anyone who knows the uses of charcoal? Does it help when someone has been poisoned? If you know the uses of charcoal, please help us to understand in the comment section. Strange things do happen in this world.